The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
In a sport where you have to go shopping like at Bergdorf Goodman, Tiffany's, you got to get one of those pieces, a Durant, a Curry, back in the day, a Shaq. The Wizards bought in bulk yesterday. This is a draft that was supposed to stink, bereft of talent. And they loaded up. They got 3 first-round picks. They may deal them again. Who knows? But this is the way they're operating. It's Tank City for the next couple of years, it looks like. But they hope they've gotten a piece along the way. And why buy Denny Advia? Looked like that was somebody who was going to stay for a while. Signed a contract extension in October. Nope. He's gone as well, gone for a draft pick, gone for a veteran point guard who, by the way, has an expiring contract, which they are sure to deal at some point, maybe even before he plays a game for the Wizards. That's Malcolm Brogdon. Let's unpack all of this. We're going to spend a lot of time on last night's draft because the Wizards were very active, and they had the number 2 pick, and they used the number 2 pick in the way that most people thought they would.
With the second pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Washington Wizards select Alex Sarr from Toulouse, France, overtime elite and Australia's Perth Wildcats of the NBL.
Now, well, that had been expected, and it had been expected for kind of an unusual reason. He wanted to be here. When's the last time that you heard of a player who really wanted to be in Washington? And we're going to play some of the interviews that Alex Sarr did last night, but didn't sound like he necessarily loved the monuments or loved the weather that we have here in the summer. I think it was he was looking at the Wizards organization, how it's being run. It's being run the same way it was done in Oklahoma City, where they're building with young players, and he wanted to be a part of it. He did not even work out for the Hawks. Cost himself, I guess, a little bit of money in not being the number 1 pick and going number 2, but I guess he didn't care, wanted to be here, so that was kind of unusual. We'll look at that. And then prior to the draft, I guess a couple of hours before it started, this was really a stunner. Adrian Wojnarowski reporting, and it turned out to be true, that the Wizards were trading Denny Advia, who had signed a $55 million contract extension back in October, which is, kind of a team-friendly deal in this day and age, 4 years, 55, that they were trading him to the Portland Trail Blazers for the 14th pick and Malcolm Brogdon, who's 31 years old. He's been a very good player, taken in the second round of the 2016 draft, averaged 15 points last year, shot 44% from the field, and 41% from beyond the line. Now, you might say, they need a veteran presence next year with all these young players, and he might be a guy to hold it together. Or, with the expiring contract, could they deal him to a team that's interested in being good and somebody who can give them, veteran presence and a backup as well. So they got a lot of flexibility there. And then they used that 14th pick to take Bub Carrington, who is 18 years old. He's not 19 yet, spent his freshman year at Pitt, had a good year. He's a guard from Baltimore. You got to be old to remember this, but if you remember the old My Three Sons show, William Frawley, who played Fred Mertz on the Lucy show, went to that show and was the original uncle who was living with the family, Uncle Bub. It's the last time I heard the name Bub Carrington. Not Bob, but Bub, B-U-B. He's going to be playing, I guess, in Washington. Happy to be there since he's from Baltimore for sure, so he gets there. And then they moved up. They were at 26, and they moved up 2 spots, and they took player by the name of Kyshawn George, Kyshawn George out of Miami. Good three-point shooter. Took him with the number 24 pick, and they also sent the 51st pick, which would be a second-rounder today. They've changed the way they do this. They used to do both rounds in the same night, But now, and I guess this is a good idea, especially with the debates coming up tonight, they're not going to wear us out with this being night coverage. So 4 o'clock this afternoon, they'll finish up the draft with round 2. And the Wizards at the moment don't have a pick. They could trade back in, but they wind up with 3 players in this draft. Going backwards, Keyshawn George, number 24, out of Miami with the 24th pick. With the 14th pick, Bub Carrington, who's a guard from Pitt. And, of course, at the top, they take Alex Sarr, who we've heard his name for several days now. Jonathan Givony is an analyst, draft analyst for ESPN. I think he's new. I haven't heard his name mentioned very often, but he's analyzing the draft, and as soon as the pick was made, this is what he told us about Alex Sarr.
Alex Sarr is the type of unicorn big man every team covets in the modern NBA, with his ability to protect the rim and space the floor. 7'1" with length, mobility, and explosiveness in spades. He led the Australian NBL in block percentage, but he can do more than that with the way he covers ground, hedging ball screens, switching on the perimeter, and operating out of drops. He's not a finished product offensively by any means, but the flashes he showed, pushing off the defensive glass, passing out of short rolls, finishing skillfully out of pick and roll, and even stepping outside and making 22 three-pointers this season gives him quite a bit of upside to tap into on that end of the floor as he gets stronger and tougher and improves his feel for the game. Sarr's camp honed in on Washington from very early on in this process, with general manager Will Dawkins telling associates he sees shades of Chet Holmgren in Alex Sarr, a player he had a role in drafting in Oklahoma City. I see a little more Kristaps Porzingis here. Malika, it's 2 for 2 now. The French Revolution continues in the NBA.
Funny, they had Kristaps Porzingis, but he's gone, so maybe they get a young Kristaps Porzingis, maybe one who can stay healthy. He has a brother who plays in the NBA. I don't think anybody was aware of this until last night. His name is Oliver Sarr. He's also 7 feet tall. He's filled out a little bit more than his brother. He's 237 pounds, which is maybe a weight that Alex Sarr can get to at one point. He's a two-way player, been with Oklahoma City for 3 years. That's another thing, you know. You might pump your brakes a little bit on this excitement about the Will Dawkins era, because this does have a bit of a scent of the Ron Rivera era, because there does seem to be all kinds of connections to Oklahoma City. But he did take his brother in free agency. Oliver Sarr played 4 years at Wake Forest, pretty decent player, not drafted. They pick him up. He's two-way back and forth to the G League and playing with the Thunder. He's played 46 games for them over 3 years, 4.8 points a game and 3.5 rebounds. So it's two different levels of player, it looks like, at least in speculation, because one goes undrafted, the other is the number 2 pick of the draft. But there's that. And the brother apparently has a great influence on him. He's 5 years older and was a role model for him. So when he was taken, when Sarr was taken, he was talking to ESPN and got emotional about the brother connection.
Your brother, obviously a big part of your basketball inspiration. What has he shared with you about playing in this league?
I mean, he shared a lot with me, like everything I've learned is through him, and he gave me all his knowledge, and, till this day, it's really special to have someone like him in my corner. I
hear you getting a little choked up. Tell me why.
Because, I went to read his draft, and, I know how it feels to go out undrafted, and for me to be able to be a top pick now is, it's really special.
Monica McNutt with Alex Sarr. She, by the way, did a very good job last night. She's a basketball player at Georgetown. The first time I heard of her, she did a game during the pandemic with Steve Buckhantz at McDonough. CBS was doing games, and I'd never heard of her before. She was very good, and she's a rising star at ESPN and did a very, very good job interviewing the players after they were drafted. When the dust settled, Scott Van Pelt got his chance to talk to Sarr on his show, which, as you may or may not know, originates from Washington, D.C.
Our studio is about a mile away from your new home, and I'm going to get to the Wizards in a minute, but I want to start with the emotion of the night. Folks that have watched this show know that I'm not afraid to cry. Hell, I cried on this show last night. When you were talking to Monica McNutt, it was clear the emotion hit you. And when it did, what was the reality that landed with you, that moved you to tears? I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, I just thought back to all the moments I shared with my brother, and got a little emotional for sure, because it's such a big achievement, and, I'm really happy right now.
That's fantastic. You mentioned your brother. He's a little older and has been on a similar path. How much does it help to have a family member who can tell you so many things to anticipate that you're now going through?
I mean, it helps a lot, having a brother that already plays in the NBA. Like, he kind of acts like I'm an NBA player, because he just tells me so much, and, I'm learning so much through him.
In terms of what you feel like you can bring now and what you feel like you can bring in time, it's a maturing process in the NBA, right? Who you will be in a few years maybe isn't who you are now. What's your sense, Alex, of the kind of progression you're hoping to make in time here in Washington?
I mean, I'm trying to improve all around. I'm trying to improve in my game and everything I do. I don't think there's a single thing that I'm, perfect at. I think I can get better at a lot of different things. So, but I know that from day one I can bring a lot of versatility and a lot of defensive versatility too.
Right. What do you know about Washington right now? I mean, because we can hook you up. I got you hardwired. You need a realtor, we got you. We can take care of you here because, as I say, we're a mile away from where you're going to be playing. But what's your first thought about playing in the nation's capital?
I mean, I don't know much about D.C., but I know a lot about the Wizards, and I know they play really fast. It's a young team, and I can't wait to join them.
Well, the nation's capital awaits, Alex. I know you've been talking basically nonstop since your name was called, and I'm certain that you'd like to get with your family and your folks and enjoy this evening. So go do that. Congratulations and all the best here in Washington, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Alex Sarr with SVP, and good for SVP for getting in a plug for Kevin Sheehan's wife. Didn't mention her by name, but she is, I'm sure, the realtor that he's talking about because she was the realtor that sold Scott his house. So there's that. But the big point there at the end, I thought, at least the way I heard it, it didn't sound like it was Sarr saying he wanted to play in Washington, D.C. Yes, this is a great international city, and somebody who grew up in France and has played in other places, including his last stop in Australia, might, want to be in a place like this over Atlanta. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like he's really interested in the way the Wizards play basketball, and it's understandable now when you connect the dots because the brother has been playing Oliver in Oklahoma City, back and forth, of course, to the G League, but part of the organization for the last 3 years, and he was signed by Will Dawkins, who is the general manager of the Washington Wizards. So there's, you don't have to be a genius to figure these things out. This is Dawkins on Sarr and why he liked him so much.
Alex is a special young man. He has a humility to him, but also a confidence. So when you put those things together with the work ethic that he's proven, and he's not afraid to really explore his game and take chances. So he left home at 14, went to Madrid, played there for a few years, went to America, tried something new with OTE, wanted another challenge, went and played with grown men in Australia. So he's someone that's always looking for more, always trying to get better and compete, and knows who he is. So when you talk to him, it's like a quiet confidence that he knows he's going to continue to get better and has a lot of work to do, but he didn't run away from that. So he's a true basketball player.
That's got a lot of confidence, too. Of course, the older brother kind of paved the way, but leaving home at 14 to play basketball in various places, moving around, he does shoot threes, and in this game today at 7 feet, you got to shoot threes. He's not very good at it right now. Hit about 30%, but they think that he can work on that and get that a lot better. Right now, he's more of a defender, more of a shot blocker, and the Wizards had the worst record in the paint defensively this past year, 58 points a game in the paint. So they hope that he can be a little bit of a deterrent when they come rolling in the paint next season. But, these are all guys who are going to be projects, and for a team that's going to be bad, why not bring in guys who could possibly develop? These are all young guys. You got a first-round pick at age 19 in Sarr. You got Bub Carrington, who's 18 years old. And I think the guy from University of Miami, Kaishan, what is his name? Kaishan George. I think he only played 1 year there as well, and he's a good three-point shooter. So these are guys they can wait and see, and before you make a decision on a second contract, You got enough time to look at them. If it doesn't work out, you move on. You just keep adding players, and you keep adding draft picks. And when you have the draft capital, you can move up, which is what they did to some extent last night. There's only 2 spots to move up. But they are able to maneuver things in a way that a lot of teams can't, because it's going to be a long haul. This is not a 2-year rebuilding process. This is probably going to take 3-4 years. To think that they might be a playoff team in 2 years might be a little optimistic. I don't think there's any chance they'll be a playoff team this year. And we'll see. Even with the second round tonight, you could see another veteran dealt. I mean, it's not 100%. That they're coming back with, the bulk of the roster already. Obvious starter is gone, and he had a breakout year this past year. So maybe, that's another thing. You get a guy under a reasonable contract, which is what they did. I know $55 million doesn't sound like reasonable, but that's, in this day and age, a reasonable contract, who is at 23, has made a big step up. He was like an 8-point-a-game guy before that. Now, last year, he averages 15 points and 7 rebounds a game. All right, and you got cost certainty with them for the next few years, which is, I'm sure, was attractive to Portland, and they move on as well. So, this is the NBA today, and in a year that we didn't have a gem like Wembanyama, you got to look at what they did in the 3 picks, and you got to say, yeah, all right, seems to make sense. Let's give these guys a little more time on that. Coming up. We've got Jonathan Givony, who is a draft analyst for ESPN, and he will answer the Seinfeld-style question, as we saw 3 of the first 6 players taken in the NBA draft last night from France. What's the deal with French players? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, so we had the NBA draft last night, and I'm sure you're up to speed by now that Alex Sarr, as expected from France, was the Wizards' pick at number 2. They also did some wheeling and dealing over the course of the evening, and they wound up with Bub Carrington. First name is Carlton, so he goes by Bub, which really seems to be like a 50s name. What's up, Bub? I haven't heard anybody called Bub in a long time, but Bub Carrington's coming here. He's a guard from Pittsburgh, played high school basketball in Baltimore. Happy to be here. And then they moved up from 26 to 24, and they took Keyshawn George, who is a forward from Miami, good three-point shooter. And they dealt away their second rounders, 51. So at the moment, they have no pick in the second round of the draft, which starts at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But it's possible that they'll trade back into it. And in a draft that wasn't supposed to have a lot of talent, to come away with 3 players, kind of a surprise. But, this is a team that's in flux and rebuilding and dealing players left and right, including, Denny Advia, who was the longest tenured Wizard. He was the grand old man of the team at 23, in terms of experience. And now he goes to Portland in that deal, which lands them Bub Carrington. Now, the top 3 picks, or 3 of the top 6 picks, as I should put it, are from France. One of them is the first one, Zachary Richeche from France. He goes to Atlanta. Alex Sarr from France goes to Washington at 2. Charlotte at 6 took Tejan Saloon, who's a forward. He goes number 6 overall. And further down in the draft, the New York Knicks took Pacome Dadier from France at 25. So before the draft yesterday, Jonathan Givony, who's an analyst for ESPN, was on the Dan Patrick Show. Ross Tucker guest hosting as Dan's on vacation. And he asked the question, as we pretty much knew that the top 2 picks were going to be from France, what's the deal now with French players?
France is the most ethnically diverse country in Europe. Huge, populations of people with Senegalese, Congolese, Guadeloupe, Ivory Coast descent. It's the same thing that we're seeing on the French soccer team. They're ranked number 2 in the world. I've spent a lot of time in France over the last 20 years, and every time I step into a gym, for, a youth level game, I mean, just the talent, physical talent is incredible. There's so much size and length and athleticism. And the infrastructure has really caught up. The coaching has caught up. And we're really seeing French teams make more of an investment in playing these guys at a younger age. Now, they saw what, Victor Wembanyama leading his team to the finals a year ago, Bilal Koulibaly starting at point guard in the finals after barely playing the first half of the season. So I think, basketball is very popular in France in no small part due to Tony Parker, but also Nick Batum, Rudy Gobert, Yvan Fournier, Boris Diaw. So it's, it's been a great legacy of French players, and it's only going to get stronger and stronger now that they have the number one prospect in the world who's playing in the NBA right now, Victor Wembanyama, a future MVP.
Yeah, you think of the Dream Team 32 years ago. It's a long time for most people. It doesn't seem as long for me. But think of what it spurned. I don't remember any French players in the NBA prior to 1992. There may have been one or two along the way. But the influence that the Dream Team had is remarkable, and we're seeing the fruits of that now with, again, the top 2 picks coming from France and 3 of the top 6. This is Giovoni on the 2 players that went 1 and 2, with Atlanta taking Zachary Richer and Sarr going number 2 to the Wizards. Again, this is before the draft, but he pretty much knew what was going to happen. But this is Giovoni on why these guys stand out so much and why they go at the top of the draft.
I think they're both ready to play right away. They're high-level role players who can step on an NBA court and impact the game defensively, first and foremost. Zachary Richer played at an exceptionally high level of basketball this year. His team made the finals of the Euro Cup. They made the semifinals of the French playoffs. He was a leading player for them. They were the best defensive team in both of the leagues that he competed in, and he was their best defender. When the 6'10" guy, when they needed to get a stop, they would put him on a point guard. So that's going to translate to the NBA right away, and his instincts are going to translate too. He's an outstanding passer. He's a great cutter. The game comes very easily for him, and he can shoot the ball at a very high level. So every team in the NBA is looking for that. Alex Sarr, the same thing. He led the Australian NBL, which is a very strong league, in block percentage this season. So he's going to come in ready to impact the game on that end right away. He also made quite a few threes. He's very good pushing the ball off the defensive glass. He's good out of short rolls. He's an excellent pick-and-roll finisher. So, a guy with those kind of physical attributes who already has the ability to impact the game on the defensive end. I mean, any team that drafts him, most likely Washington, is going to slot him in right away and give him the runway to develop into his full potential.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. He did go to Washington. That was done yesterday afternoon. So here we are moving forward into round 2, and what's the big intrigue? Bronny James. Where's Bronny James going to go, if at all? The Lakers are still sitting there at 55. Will they use that pick for Bronny James? Will another team, kind of take a flyer and see if they can get something better in return if, LeBron really wants Bronny with the Lakers, or there is even I think it's a remote possibility now that it appears that LeBron's guy, J.J. Redick, was hired. But he has said he would go to another team to play with Bronny if it made sense. He has opted out of his contract. He's expected to opt back in, sign something like a 3-year deal, $160 million to stay with the Lakers. Amazing 40-year-old guy looking to play 3 more years, but looks like he's in shape to do that and would want to play with his son, who's going to take some time to develop. I mean, even if he winds up with the Lakers, he's going to be on a 2-way contract, and is just going to play sporadically with them. So it's going to take a couple of years for him to develop, play just 1 year of college basketball. But that's the thing to look for, I think, and that'll be sometime like 6, because the draft is starting at 4 o'clock. Maybe they get like 3 minutes per pick. It was 5 last night. And, his teammates, 2 of them were drafted last night. Isaiah Collier went 29 to the Utah Jazz, and A.J. Johnson went number 23 to Milwaukee. So he's had 2 guys already taken into the league, and Bronny is still out there, and I think that's why there's just a little bit of interest. Some other players are still available there. There's, I think, a big surprise at the top in that Zach Edey went as high as he did. I don't think most people thought that Zach Edey would be a top 10 pick because of how slow he is, but They're going to look at him in Memphis. He's the number 9 pick of Memphis. As far as the American players go, Reed Shepherd, who I think about a month ago was being mentioned as a possibility for the Wizards. Obviously, they didn't go in that direction. But he goes to Houston, which, there's been talk that Kevin Durant could be headed to Houston. This started yesterday with Adrian Wojnarowski looking at some of the draft picks that were traded back and forth. They traded for the rights to the picks that they gave up to land Kevin Durant in the first place, and he's wondering, are they using those picks to maybe get Durant to Houston? Matt Ishbia, who's the owner of the Suns, he said on Twitter last night, the NBA draft night is best. Everyone's talking about the drama and storylines. Some are right, some are wrong. My turn. Phoenix loves Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant loves Phoenix. We are competing for the championship this year because we have the team to do it. Gotta love draft night. Go Suns. Well, yeah, people say that, and things change. Durant's 36 years old. He'd like to add another championship. He's on his 3rd team in 5 years. The trio of Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal doesn't look good enough, especially with the surrounding people that they have around them, because they're spending so much money on those 3. That ridiculous contract that Beal signed with the Wizards, the no-trade deal, which is paying him like $50 million a year, he ain't worth that. And Booker right now at 27 is the key piece there. You want to keep him there. The other 2 you want to discard. Beal's not going to be easy because he's got a no-trade clause, and with Durant, at 36, this is superstar time in the NBA. This is the best time to be a star. You go where you want to go. Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar were able to actually pull this off, both of them going to the Lakers in their careers. They had that kind of leverage. It was a little bit different then, especially with Wilt. Now, Wilt was threatening to go sign with the ABA, and he was playing with the Philadelphia 76ers. Jack Ramsey, who was the GM of the team, he told me this in a conversation we had on ESPN Radio years ago. I said, well, why did you ever trade Wilt Chamberlain? He said, I didn't have a choice. He said, he told me if he didn't trade him to the Lakers, he was going to go sign in the ABA. So he wanted to be in Los Angeles, loved beach volleyball. He built this gorgeous house on a mountain there, and that was his lifestyle. That's where he wanted to be. So Ramsey sent him to the Lakers in a deal he didn't really want to make. And then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he had been playing in Milwaukee. He wanted out of Milwaukee, and he threatened to retire. He let's see, in 1969, when he came into the league, the ABA was still viable. When he was traded, the ABA was still alive. Now, I don't know if he would have had the opportunity to go to the ABA or if he had any interest, but he made it clear he wanted to go to the Lakers. He got to the Lakers. Well, this has been going on since LeBron, wanted to go to Miami. He went to Miami, but he was a free agent then. Now guys who are under contract decide where they want to go, and they get traded there, and they trade players along with them. But Ishbia, for now, who paid $4 billion for his team, and thinks with this trio he can win an NBA championship, and maybe he can with some really good parts around him, but he just doesn't have any money to do it because of the salaries that those 3 guys eat up. But he is pounding his fist and saying, we are not trading Kevin Durant. We are not trading Kevin Durant. We shall see. So anyway, that's round 1 of the draft in the books. Another name might talk about, with your friends today. Dalton Knecht, 23 years old, from Tennessee, was terrific in the NCAA tournament. Lakers got him at 17. That may be a steal. That may be a guy who can really be a big piece for them because he's probably NBA ready now, where a lot of these guys are still in the developmental stage, especially the top 2 from France. So that's it for round 1. We move to round 2 today. We'll get back to more reaction on what happened last night. Also, it was 23 years ago today that Kwame Brown, yes, the Kwame Brown, was drafted by the Washington Wizards. And it's kind of fun to go back and listen to some of the audio from that night and have either a good chuckle or a good cry. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So it's the 23rd anniversary of the drafting of Kwame Brown. But not every high draft pick winds up in disappointment like Kwame, one of the big busts in the history of the league. And somehow when you're taking number 2 and it doesn't work out, it's not nearly as bad as when it doesn't work out at number 1. And expectations for this draft really, really low. So 5 years from now, we may look at Alex Sarr and say, boy, that was really shrewd drafting on the part of the Wizards. Or, yeah, in like the Kwame Brown tradition, it didn't work out. We'll have to see. But they were active last night, winding up with 3 players. And this is new, kids. They all want to be in Washington, D.C. Players have not wanted to come and play for the Wizards. It's been a long run here. Remember KD to D.C., the big campaign? Oh, Kevin Durant, he grew up in Prince George's County. He certainly wants to play for his hometown team. And when he came in with the Oklahoma City Thunder, he got such a reception. It was like, oh, my God, come here. And he said to reporters, and he was, I think, shrewd about this. He said, playing in your hometown isn't an easy thing to do. And I didn't like the fact that the fans were rooting for us to win on their court. So that was kind of interesting. But we will get to all kinds of reaction on Alex Sarr and the drafting last night and how people feel about this. A lot of comments from Will Dawkins coming up. Also, we will look back on the night that Kwame Brown arrived in Washington with such high hopes. And there were columns written, such as one by Tom Boswell, who called the debut news conference of Kwame Brown the best since Cal Ripken Jr. Oh, well. Time marches on. This was before the draft last night, before things got going. The ESPN crew with the big table and a bunch of people sitting around talking about what might happen and interviewing prospects as they came along. And Alex Sarr showed up in a really spiffy-looking suit, nice tan, summerish suit, as he was getting ready to be drafted. Now, he does, if you don't know, he's got a brother who plays in the NBA. He's a two-way player back and forth from the G League. His name is Oliver Sarr. Played at Wake Forest, spent 4 years there, undrafted, wound up in Oklahoma City, has only played 46 games for them over the 3 years, averages 4.8 points and 3.5 rebounds a game. So he's still developing, although he is 25 years old. And at that point in your career in the NBA, if you're not showing signs of being a star, it may soon be over for you. But, at 7 feet tall, he can probably hang around as a role player or bench player for a few more years. And who knows, may develop. Big men always take longer to develop. Maybe in next year or so he takes a step up and becomes a more valuable player. But the expectation for Sarr is that he becomes a star, though he's a big developmental guy. He's only 19 years old. He's very thin, and he's got a long way to go offensively. But, you're betting on the upside here for a team that's rebuilding and pretty early in the rebuilding process. So Sarr sat down with the ESPN crew, and this was the first question that was asked of him, given that in the workouts that were going on prior to the draft, he said he wasn't going to go to Atlanta and work out for them. The only team he was interested in was Washington. So this was Kendrick Perkins with a very good question to Sarr as he sat with the crew.
I want to know, what was it about Atlanta that made you not want to be there? Since you didn't work out for them, you didn't visit, they got the number 1 pick. You could have potentially went with the number 1 pick. What is it about ATL?
Yeah, I never said I didn't want to be there, and I got a great team of agents around me that led me to the choice. But I think, Atlanta saw me play this year. I was playing in Atlanta when I was at OTE, so I don't think it's all about one workout.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, your film is what you got. Your film is your proof. You're saying I was in Atlanta. They saw me work out. Their scouts were at the game. Why do I need to go work out for them? That's basically what you're saying.
I'm just saying that there's probably enough film out there, just for one day of workouts.
Right. Amen.
Well, our draft experts compared you to a Kristaps Porzingis on the offensive end and Nick Claxton on the defensive end. That would be, a big comp. Who do you think you model your game after?
When I was younger, the players I was looking up to is Kevin Durant, Giannis.
Bigger comps.
Yeah. Those tall guys that can do pretty much everything on the floor. I think, that's what was leading me to improving on my game.
And how does a French 18-year-old end up in Australia, and what was that experience like for you, and how did that help prepare you for the NBA?
Yeah, after OTE, I wanted to take a new challenge and play in a professional league before I entered the draft, and the NBL is like such a tough league, and it's really reputed for being, a grown man's league. And I wanted to see how I measure compared to these guys. So I think it really helped me take the next step in my game.
What is this moment in time in terms of the NBA? Obviously, Victor Wembanyama going number 1 overall this year. You and Zachary, you mean one of you guys could possibly go number 1 in this year's draft. What does it mean for the country of France to have such high caliber NBA players right now leading the
Yeah, I think it just shows the level of French talents. Next year is going to be even more players from France, and I think you see more and more talents coming out of France, and our national team is going to be really good in the next few years.
Wait, few years. Right.
Yeah,
we got an Olympics.
Yeah,
we got an Olympics. And we got Olympics in a little bit. But to stay on French basketball, that French national team, are you guys the best team in Europe?
In Europe?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to just.
We lost the last World Cup to Germany won it.
Yes.
I think.
We're starting a little beef between you and some of the Germans.
I want to know this. That's fine. I want to know this. Going into next year, do you have your goals set? What are your goals? Some of the goals you want to reach, achieve, and show the world that you could do?
Yeah, my goals is just to be impactful. However way I can. Just however minutes I get, just every time I'm on the floor.
Oh, you go get the minutes. You go get the minutes.
Yeah.
Alex, if you couldn't pick yourself number 1, which prospect in this draft would you take number 1?
I think Zach is a really good player too. I've been knowing Zach for the past 3 years, and I'm really happy for him.
That's exactly the way it happened. Less than an hour later, Zachary Richichet going number 1 to Atlanta. Alex Sarr going number 2 to Washington. React to the pick. Seth Davis, Lanny Davis's son, grew up here, went to Bullis before he went to Duke, now becoming a college basketball analyst for CBS. I guess he's got familiarity with the foreign game as well, and he was on a podcast last night with his reaction to Sarr going 2 to Washington.
If I may play the sympathy card, I'm a lifelong Washington Bullets Wizards fan, DMV resident. Very proud of my team for tanking for this particular draft. That's
sarcasm.
The life of a Wizards fan. Because who was in the draft last year that you would want to tank for? I can tell you that Wizards fans and the Wizards in general should be very excited about this pick. I think Alex Sarr is the best prospect in this draft. If I didn't have any players, was just starting a team with any player in the draft, I would start with Sarr. First of all, I mentioned this about Richichet. So he's a guy who measured 6'11", 3/4, but he's got a 7'4" wingspan. He led the NBL in Australia in block rate. He is an elite defender today. And even though he's only about a 28% three-point shooter, he did make a few threes. And when you look at his stroke, looks pretty good. It looks like something that he could develop. I don't think any of us would have ever thought that someone like Brook Lopez would be able to score anywhere from 5 feet outside the basket. Kawhi Leonard couldn't make anything outside of 5 feet when he played for San Diego State. This kid is long. He's bouncy. He's a great competitor. He's been around. You talk about him being from France, played at Overtime Elite, played for Real Madrid, played for Perth in the NBL. So he's been exposed to a lot of different styles of play. The NBL is a pretty high level of basketball, so it's not like you're doing this against nobodies. And he's all upside. He runs, he jumps, he's bouncy, he's long, he works hard. And whatever's going on in the country of France, they seem to be cranking out some really, really good basketball players right now. So, hey, as a Wizards fan, I'm absolutely amped for this pick. I think he's going to be a very effective starter on a playoff caliber team in the unlikely event that the Wizards ever get back to the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the kind of the cloud we live under here, right? In the unlikely event that the Wizards ever get back to the playoffs. But this is part of the process, bringing in young guys, hoping they develop. He's a 28% three-point shooter, but as Seth said, well, he made a few, and he looked okay doing it. So maybe he can develop that part of his game. It's just amazing to me, having watched basketball as long as I have, that you draft a 7-footer and the discussion of three-pointers is part of the picture, but that's the way the game is played these days. Reaction from Will Dawkins, the general manager, held a news conference late last night after making all the moves that he made in the first round of the draft, as expected, taking Sarr number 2. But just before the draft, he made the deal with Portland to send them Denny Advia, and in return, They get Malcolm Brogdon, who's a 31-year-old point guard with an expiring contract. They may trade him, but they wound up taking Bub Carrington, who's from Baltimore but played last year at Pitt. And then they moved up a couple of spots to take Keyshawn George from Miami with the 24th pick, who's a pretty good three-point shooter. All three of the players said this, that they wanted to come to Washington. Sarr, most notably, didn't even work out for the Hawks, who had the number 1 pick. He wanted to be here, and this was something that Dawkins addressed last night.
I can't really control the draft or what happens in front of us or behind us. I can only control what we do here in D.C., and the fact that Alex and his agency wanted to come here and work out and see the city, we were more than happy to put that in and get that done for him. So I'm happy he wants to be here. I'm happy he came in to visit. But at the end of the day, we can't control what happens around us, and we just focus on the Wizards.
Yeah, I don't think they sent him any brochures about the monuments and the nice places to visit and nice places to live and eat. I don't think that was all a part of it. And from what I gather in listening to these interviews, it was more about the organization. I mean, nobody has ever looked at the Wizards organization, as far as I know, and said, yeah, that's the model franchise. That's where you want to be. And now with what they're building, and a guy who's 19 years old wants to be a part of it, and that seemed to be the case as well with the other 2 players they drafted last night. Here's more from Dawkins.
If you reference back to the end of the season when our players did their exit interviews, I think you guys touched on it when you guys asked Michael and I in our exit interview about the environment and this place being a place where players got better, but also a place where they wanted to be. And that from the very beginning when we got here was something we wanted to change. And I think you felt that. I know we want to make the environment a little bit even more repeatable this year, but when you get guys who are aligned and they have the transparency and level of communication that we have from the outset, it makes it a little easier. But D.C. is a great city. D.C. is a place where guys will get better, and we want their agents to understand we're going to treat them with the highest level of respect and give them resources to maximize themselves. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here for players, especially young players. But our current roster players want to be here too, and they want to keep pushing this thing forward. So for us, we just want to create an environment where we treat people well and we give them the resources to work, and we hold them accountable to that. And I think everybody, when you're up front, can get on the same page. And Brian will do a really good job of making sure that happens from the very outset going into Summer League, and we'll have meetings on that this weekend. But again, when guys want to be here and they're the right people and the right fit and are also fit the talent bucket, you feel good about that.
It doesn't necessarily mean that even if you want to be here, that they want you here. Like Denny Advia, when they gave him the 4-year, $55 million extension, which in this day and age is considered to be team-friendly, you'd have thought, he's going to stay here for a while. But they wind up dealing him last night, and that's how they wind up with 3 players in the first round, and this was Dawkins addressing that last night.
We did some things to add 3 different players to our roster who all have youth, all have athleticism, all play on both ends, and all want to be here in D.C. to continue what we have going. And we're excited about that. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to add some good people. And I'm really, really excited for the way the draft finished tonight for us.
Will, you mentioned being able to add 3 players. How important was it, especially at the stage that you guys are at, to be as active as possible and kind of take chances? And that's not to say you're just grabbing anybody you can, but I think a lot of people would say this draft is not as starry, but can you kind of speak to the importance of taking swings and just getting talent in the door? Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't use the context of taking swings. I think the group that we have downstairs in that arena, I guess it's our lounge that we turned into our draft room, is full of qualified people who did a tremendous job preparing us this year. We didn't have 2 weeks. We actually had a whole 12 months to prepare this year, and the scouts, they work their tails off. They identify players. They scour the streets, get information, and our strategy group is coming up with ideas. And this is kind of that time of year where you can combine, and we'll always be aggressive. We'll always try to be strategic. And when you have time to prepare, you kind of identify your players and the people you want to go get and do your best to go get them. Sometimes it works out. It takes 2 to tango, as you know. But we try to identify people first, try to identify talents, and if we can get them, we're going to get them. So I think you've seen the last 2 years that we're willing to move and
go get who we want to get.
And, look, with all the work that goes into it, and I think they just hired another executive who got fired in Detroit and has connections to them with Oklahoma City. All those things, if they work out, they work out. But, it is he can say they're not taking swings, but they're taking swings. The likelihood that all three players they took wind up working out, very slim, very, very small, and even more of a crapshoot tonight as we get into round two. They traded out of it. I don't think it's impossible that they trade back in. The big question is going to be about Bronny James, and will he be there at 55 when the Lakers pick? And if he is, will they take him, or will they even gamble? And maybe, this could be seen as something of a slight. Is it possible? Because 55, that's pretty much the end of the draft. After that, you got Denver, 56, Memphis, 57, and Dallas, 58. That's it. That's where it ends. It doesn't end at 60. It ends at 58. And so is it possible that they hold their breath and see if he goes in the last four and maybe sign him as a free agent? I don't know if that be any advantage to the Lakers necessarily. They think they see somebody at 55 they like. But that's really the intrigue. There's a few more names out there that you might recognize. But, outside of a few guys that from the NCAA tournament, like Reed Shepherd, who went 3 to Houston, Donovan Clingan, who went number 7 to Portland out of UConn, his teammate, San Antonio, Stephen Castle, going to them. But, it's a lot of guys who you don't know. And a lot of it is because of the way people move around in college basketball, the one and done, all those things. And that's why we wind up with the draft that when you look at it top to bottom, you go, yeah, okay. We'll see what happens next year. Wait until next year. Wait till the Cooper Flag sweepstakes get started. His flag will be one and done at Duke. Okay, coming up, it was 23 years ago today that Kwame Brown was the number 1 pick of the NBA draft. The first high schooler drafted number one. How'd that work out? Not too good. Not too good. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So it's 23 years ago tonight, and believe me, there was genuine excitement when the late, great commissioner, David Stern, made this announcement.
With the first pick in the 2001 NBA draft, the Washington Wizards select Kwame Brown from Lynn Academy, Brunswick, Georgia.
There had been high schoolers drafted in the first round before. Kobe Bryant, obviously. Kevin Garnett was taken, I think, 5th overall. And that really, got things going in the mid-'90s. And there were, more and more, LeBron James became the number 1 pick a couple of years later. And, it was not so unusual. But this was the first time that high schooler had gone number one, right at the top of the draft. And this wasn't a high schooler who had played at like IMG Academy. He came from a small area in Georgia, a relatively small school. He had, though, this tantalizing body. He was 6'11", weighed 270 pounds. And the big man was a bigger part of the game then than it is now. We didn't have as many big men shooting threes, maybe not any. And the hope was that as he got older and more mature, that he could go on to be a superstar. You also had the Michael Jordan factor in this. Now, Jordan had come in January of 2000, and he, fired the coach and, ran out the rest of the season. Then he put his handprints on the season before that. So that would have been 2000, 2001. And he hired Leonard Hamilton, who had never been a pro coach before. He had been coaching at Miami, University of Miami. He'd done a good job there, and Jordan thought, I'll take a coach who's got no preconceived notions about the NBA. I'll teach him to do it my way, and we're going to be successful. Well, it was a complete disaster. The team won 19 games. Leonard Hamilton was doing his post-game news conference when he was suddenly called to Jordan's office, where he was fired after the last game of the season, and that was that. And so there was a lot of things happening in that offseason, a lot of really exciting things that, although he hadn't officially announced it and wouldn't officially announce it until September, A couple of months before, when they had the draft, it was pretty much known that Michael Jordan was getting himself back in shape, and he was going to play in the 2001-2002 season with the idea that he was going to teach these guys how to win. He would get them into the playoffs, and he would teach the players on the team how to win in the playoffs. That was his plan. And, boy, I mean, Jordan left too soon, as we all know, from The Last Dance just a few years earlier. And if he said he had something left in the tank, doggone it, you were going to believe it. And he spent the offseason working out with his old buddies. And there was even talk that they were going to bring Charles Barkley back. Barkley was supposedly getting himself back in shape, and he was going to join the party. And it was going to be a happening in D.C., and they were going to do it with veteran players and adding this young kid who, as it turned out, was scared to death. But on draft night, when he talked to the late Craig Sager, he was confident that he was going to show people that, yes, a high schooler could do it. He could come out and be the number one pick of the draft and be successful.
So many people said it's not good for high school players to go right to the NBA. What do you have to say now?
I mean, I'm at peace with my decision to go to the NBA, and I'm not responsible for what other people think. I think I made the right decision, and I'm just going to bless my family, and it's amazing how God works, so I'm just going to keep living.
Yeah, well, he came here to Washington as the number one pick. Now, as part of the TNT coverage, TNT had the draft in those days, John Thompson was doing analysis, and he had Michael Jordan with him. They were longtime friends, their connection with Nike, and so this was Jordan talking to Thompson about the drafting of Kwame Brown, and Thompson used the exact right phrase in asking Jordan about keeping the number one overall pick and using it for a high school player.
What possessed you to keep him and go for Kwame Brown?
Well, obviously, you can see he's a well-educated kid. I think he's done a lot in terms of his basketball capabilities. I think it's up to Doug as well as the Washington Wizards to help this kid develop, and he certainly has the skills. Now, we entertain a lot of possibilities, but none could change our minds in terms of what this kid could do in the long range for the Washington Wizards.
Well, it's one of those scenarios, Michael Jordan in the two-guard spot, Charles Barkley in the power forward, and Kwame Brown playing the center.
Well, actually, I think Charles should be getting the message. This kid can play multi-position, so no, it had nothing to do with me. In all honesty, I just felt like, I had to make my decision based on that Michael Jordan's nowhere around, and this kid's going to fit the bill for us.
Well, in looking at him, a lot of speculation, a lot of conversation about age, whether a kid should come out, shouldn't come out. How much did that factor into your decision with him?
It factored in a lot, because if we felt like this kid was not mature enough that he could handle the surroundings and that we were going to make a grave effort of making sure that we have some people that can support him, then we probably wouldn't have done this. But we feel he can handle it. I think we're going to do our best effort to try to make sure that he focuses on what's the most important things for him and his family. But I think Kwame's going to be just fine.
I think Kwame's going to be just fine. Well, he wasn't just fine. He played 2 years with Jordan. There was a tremendous Washington Post magazine piece done by Sally Jenkins as to how that worked, and it didn't go well. Kwame was treated poorly by Jordan, who thought he could, kind of like smack him in the head and get him into shape that way. Supposedly would throw basketballs at him and call him names. Kwame was a 19-year-old kid who had never lived away from home before. He had come from a tough background. A couple of his brothers were in jail. His mother had worked as a maid in a hotel to try to make ends meet. He had no experience living in a big city before, much less living on his own at the age of 19. They set him up in an apartment, and in one of the really incredible pieces, part of the story that Sally wrote, is that Kwame called his agent, and he said, I'm out of suits. And the agent said, what do you mean? We just bought like 10 of them. And he goes, no, I don't have anything to wear. He goes over to the apartment, and he finds that Kwame was taking off the suits, and instead of hanging them up, was just throwing them in the corner like they were laundry. And he didn't have any, he probably never owned a suit before, didn't have any understanding of that. Was eating most of his meals at Popeyes. They had plenty of restaurants, plenty of places to eat around where he lived, because he lived in one of those apartments across from what is now Capital One Arena. It was just a disaster. And he lasted 4 years with the Wizards. He averaged 7.7 points a game, 5.5 rebounds. He had a couple of big games. He had I think he had one 40-point game. But, this was just not working out. And finally, actually, this Ernie Grunfeld made a really good deal to get rid of him, because they traded him with LaRon Profit, who was a good, solid guy from Maryland. He went to the Lakers for Chucky Atkins and Caron Butler. And Caron Butler had a great run here in Washington, played 5 years, averaged almost 20 points a game, 6 rebounds. And Kwame then became, the Kwame Barge. He went everywhere after here. He was with the Lakers. He was with Detroit. He played with Charlotte. He played with Philadelphia. He played with Memphis. He played with Golden State. All in all, he had a 12-year NBA career, averaged 6.6 points a game, 5.5 rebounds. All in all, not the worst NBA career ever, but because of the hype of him coming to the Wizards and handpicked by Michael Jordan, and the fact that he didn't work out, that I think magnified things for him unfairly. And it's just too bad the way it worked out. He does a podcast now, and he seems to be very bitter about being called the biggest bust of all time. And I just don't think that things worked out for him. It didn't, the way he had hoped that they would, and the way that the organization did. And he's sort of become like a punchline for a lot of things. But given the hype that was building here, and given the fact that this was associated with Michael Jordan, this is before Abe Pollin fired Michael Jordan, and he left the then MCI Center in his Mercedes, which still had Illinois plates on it, and never really committed to this area. He was considered the Messiah here, and he as a player, he filled the arena for 2 years. They only won 37 games each of the 2 years he played, but people showed up to see him play. And unfortunately for Kwame, the combination with Jordan just didn't work out for him, and his career did not live up to the expectations that he had on this night 23 years ago. But the band was coming back together. Jordan was going to play. Doug Collins was hired as the new coach. Charles Barkley may play. They brought in Patrick Ewing as an assistant. Ewing was even still talking about playing then. He didn't wind up playing, but it was a happening. And unfortunately, Kwame got caught up in all of it. And as we look back 23 years and you hear Michael Jordan say, Kwame's going to be just fine. No, that's not exactly the way it worked out. Let me finish up with this story I saw today in the New York Post. The Guinness Book of World Records has recognized the world's oldest trucker. His name is Doyle Archer. He has 25 grandchildren and a great-grandfather of 26, 90 years old. And according to the Guinness Book, he has a great safety record. He's traveled 5.5 million miles over 48 states, 5 Canadian provinces. So he's had a great driving record and a wonderful career, and obviously has had a very productive and fruitful family. Here's my issue with this. He drives a truck that weighs, let me get the weight right on this, 80,000 pounds. It's 70 feet long. I'm sure he's been a great driver for a long time, but he is 90 years old. And God, if I knew as I'm driving along the highway and I see a truck that's 70 feet long, weighing 80,000 pounds, knowing that a 90-year-old man is going to be driving it, that would make me very nervous. It would make me nervous. He came to the attention of Guinness Book after a woman he works with at Coombs Incorporated checked to see if he was eligible for a record, helped him fill out an application, and the oldest driver award was awarded to him earlier this year, and he got the trophy last month. They say truckers drive about 70 hours over 8 days. That's a long time driving, especially when you're 90 years old. He did earn the million-mile safe driver designation after traveling 1 million miles without an incident, according to Guinness. But, I'm sure his eyesight is fine, and that's really all you need to pass a driving test. But your reflexes slow down. I mean, they really do. I mean, I saw this with my father. His eyesight was fading, too, and we were very fortunate that the police took his license away because he was not going to give it up voluntarily. And people who get older, they don't want to give up their independence, and I understand this. And he's 90, and he says he wants to still keep driving, and I'm sure he does. And Guinness is recognizing him as an active driver at 90, and that's the oldest driver they have on record. But if I were he, I would not put a sign on the side of my cab in the truck and say world's oldest driver, because that would make me very nervous if I were driving alongside that 80,000-pound, 70-foot truck. It just would. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe he's going to drive till he's 100 and still be very effective doing it. But just what I've witnessed with my own eyes and my own family, that's a scary proposition. All right, that's enough for me. Mike Callow sits in for Tony next. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.